Welcome back to KSTV. Tonight we finish up spotlighting the offense with the offensive line. The team loses two pretty big pieces in right guard Larry Warford, who was drafted in the third round of the NFL draft by the Detroit Lions, and center Matt Smith, who was not drafted but is in camp now as a free agent with the Atlanta Falcons. That leaves Kevin Mitchell, Darian Miller, and Zach West returning to the Cats. West missed most of spring practice while recovering from a shoulder injury, and last night he said he's doing much better, no longer wearing a shoulder strap and starting the bench press. So a lot of the talk is about what's happening at the center position. Joining us now is Kyle Tucker from the Louisville Courier-Journal. And I know, Kyle, you were out at practice yesterday. You heard what the coaches were saying. What are they saying about the offensive line and maybe who's going to fill in that role, giving the ball to the quarterback?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like Zach Myers, the redshirt freshman, is leading the way there. As you mentioned, Zach West, who started every game last year at left guard, pretty tough guy. I think he had that shoulder injury most of the season and played through it. Started every game at left guard. He's been working a lot at center. Said he's snapping the ball better, which is obviously important since that's one of the primary functions there. But obviously not something he did being a guard. But it sounds like Zach Myers is the guy that is pulling ahead there. Is a guy that was pretty highly regarded, I think, as an offensive lineman coming out of high school. They really liked him, the previous staff, and seems to be probably the most natural fit there. I think a good indicator of that is that his chief competition, John Toth, is apparently. The news to me last night from Neil Brown was that he is working at both center and right tackle now. So they're getting him some work at another position as well, which tells me that it's probably between Zach West, and Zach Myers. So I think we're going to see a pretty inexperienced guy there regardless. I think even if it was Zach West, that would be a big question mark because he hasn't played center. And if it's not him, if it's one of the other guys, it's going to be a redshirt freshman. So that's a really, I think, an underrated position battle and position of concern for them because in Neil Brown's air raid, in a perfect world, he'd really like his center to take a lot of the pre-snap reads and calls and communications off the hands of the quarterback and do a lot of that stuff for the quarterback. You want to have a pretty sharp, together center to help out in that, and I think that could be a real concern for them with an inexperienced guy there.
It seems like the offensive line every year we go through this cycle of saying they're going to be good, and I'm thinking back a year or two ago, ESPN said Kentucky may have the best offensive line in the SEC. Then, of course, there are struggles because of the teams you play. A lot of questions on offense. How good can that group be, maybe even relative to the other positions? Can this be a strong point for this team?
I would be sort of surprised if the offensive line is a strength this season. There are just so many question marks, so many new guys. That position is one that's so predicated on chemistry. On top of everything else, they're doing it a different way. They're going to be, their spreads are going to be wider than they've been used to. The pace is much faster, so they'll be tiring out probably quicker than they're used to. And frankly, they don't have much depth. There's only one or two guys probably behind the starting five that could really contribute to them, and I think that's going to become an issue. I mean, the one thing they have going for them, if in fact Myers is the guy at center and Zach West can stay at his position from last year at left guard where he started every game, if he's over there combined with Darian Miller at left tackle, then I think that potentially is one bright spot for them. All their quarterbacks are right-handed, so the left side of the line will be the blind side. And Darian Miller is an all-SEC, I think, caliber guy. He can be that guy, super athlete for his size, really, really smart, and has played a ton in his first two seasons, played as a true freshman and then started every game there last year as a true sophomore. He's a guy who could be a very good player. And if he's there beside West, they have some chemistry already from last year. That gives them, at least gives them a chance to fend off some really, really good defensive ends coming off the edge in the SEC and protect whoever is at quarterback's blind side. So that's one area I could see it being an advantage. I think as a whole, though, I'd be surprised if that's the strength of that offense.
If the quarterbacks are able to get the ball off it and the line protects them, they'll be thrown to a lot of guys that have not made plays, and some have not even seen the field. Yesterday, Mark Stoops said that Jeff Badet is one of the guys that has impressed him a little bit. When you look at this group of wide receivers, from the guys returning to the newcomers to even the walk-ons who they're talking about yesterday, What are the big questions that stand out to you, and how much do you think this lack of depth will dictate, I guess, the plays that are called this year in year one under Neil Brown?
Yeah, I think it's a significant concern for them, and certainly will probably limit. I don't know if it'll limit necessarily the plays that are called, but the formations that they'll have to use. I think they feel like they have a pretty good group of tight ends, and I think some of those tight ends are going to end up sort of serving as wide receivers, lining up in the slot and doing some things like that, playing roles that are very much wide receiver-like, because there just aren't enough numbers. They're not going to be able to get through the season. We're saying that now they have 4 more, so they have 8 total scholarship receivers. But to assume that all 8 of those guys are good enough to play, to assume that all 8 of those guys would be healthy throughout the entire season, is a pretty big stretch. And they want to play 8 to 10 receivers in a game, ideally in that offense. That's what they did at Texas Tech. They had 8 wide receivers catch 16 or more passes last year at Texas Tech. And so I think it's a major concern. I think you're definitely going to see them count heavily on the new guys. Jarvis Blue, the junior college transfer, is a guy that I think is probably most ready to play, because he played 2 years at a higher level in junior college, played at the same junior college that Cam Newton came from, I believe. I think that's right, or one of those Kansas junior colleges, but led them to the national championship game, had over 1,000 yards receiving his senior year in junior college. And so he's a guy that I think, day one, Mark Stoops said he looked smooth out there. And then the other guy is Ryan Timmons, I think, a playmaker that they've already used some at running back. They're moving him all over the place, and Tommy Maynard, their receivers coach, said he's a guy that's going to get the ball. We just have to find ways to get it to him. So you're going to see a lot of those new guys be heavily leaned upon, and I thought Neil Brown had an interesting thing to say, and that is, everybody's excited about these guys. Everybody's excited about Ryan Timmons, but, he's an 18-year-old kid, and those guys are going to make mistakes. So it's inevitable. But if they're the best guys we have, then we have to go with them and take those lumps. And so it's going to be interesting to see sort of the risk and the reward. They're going to make some big plays, and then they're going to make some sort of boneheaded new guy mistakes. And how big will those mistakes be? At what points will they come? And how much will they cost this team?
We're now into practice, and we've seen Media Day, the SEC Media Day, all of these kind of events leading up to the start of the football season. Being there, what is your big takeaway from just the way you see things done, or the mentality of the team? What are some of the big differences that you're already seeing from the Joker Phillips era to what Mark Stoops and his staff are doing at UK?
Well, it certainly seems to be a little more intensity. There seems to be a little bit more of a vision, a plan, a systematic approach to things. Certainly the way they're running practice is different. They're doing this thing they call the 2-spot, where to get more guys work, to get more film on some of these players that they don't know real well, and then certainly to give the quarterbacks a fair chance to battle this thing out. They're running basically 2 practices simultaneously. They have 2 different groups on 2 different fields going and repping guys in and out. Raymond Sanders said, the running back, said he takes a handoff from every one of the quarterbacks every single day, and most of the time he's not exactly sure who he's taking a handoff from. It's just, bang, bang, bang. There's a lot of attention to pace on offense and intensity on defense. Mark Stoops said, we're not out of the woods yet in terms of changing that mentality, but he's making sure that they get there. He said, he saw some lollygagging still the other day, a little bit of standing around from some guys, taking reps off. And, he said it very plainly, this team's not good enough to take any reps off. They need to be getting better with every chance they get. And he said, I'm not going to tolerate it. I'm not going to let this be the culture here anymore. And so certainly those are things I see changing right away. I think this staff, though, I think you sort of get the sense from that, from talking to them, certainly on offense, they recognize, they did in the spring and they still do now, that this is going to be a slow and steady process. And for as much as they are and are trying to change, I'll be curious to see how fans react this fall, because I think it's gonna take a lot more time. It's not going to be, wow, look how different these guys look in year one. I think they'll look some different, certainly be a little more competitive. But this is a long, long road ahead of them. They are talent deficient. When you start looking at some of the positions, wide receiver, we've already talked about, corner, now that they've lost another corner in J.D. Harmon, who's ineligible. This is a team, offensive line, this is a team that can. There are some places where one injury would completely wreck them, and you're going to play in the SEC. So if you don't think there's going to be one injury over the course of the year, you're pretty delusional. So it's going to be an interesting year and probably a little bit of a bumpy road in year one, but definitely there's a sense that things are moving in a new, and we'll see if it's a better direction.
And no matter how bumpy it gets, you're going to be there every step of the way. We will catch up with you again soon. Kyle Tucker, Louisville Courier-Journal, always a pleasure.
Thanks, buddy.